Namaskar, this is Akhilesh Bhargava. Welcome to Tit-bits on Business and Finance with me. If one has to decide between the government and the Reserve Bank about who has put its best to battle the COVID pandemic slowdown and revive economic growth, then it is the Reserve Bank, in our opinion, which has put its best foot forward, and it has also done the most so far. The government's fiscal policy measures in response to the pandemic have been more of a lip service and tall claims lacking substance in our analysis. It is the Reserve Bank's monetary policy which has flexed its muscle the most, mainly by ensuring that low-cost liquidity remains available in abundance in a struggling and slowing economy. Liquidity has been pumped into the system by the Reserve Bank through various measures, and the repo rates have been kept at a lowly 4% for the 8th consecutive meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee. If we now look at the Reserve Bank's engine, it is sputtering and it has run out of steam. If you compare the Reserve Bank's MPC resolution of 8th of October with that of the one before it, which is the one on the 6th of August, then you will notice that except for the dates, its conclusion is word to word the same as that of the August one, showing a complete or a near status quo in its approach, and seemingly nothing new seems to have been left in the monetary arsenal of the Reserve Bank. Let us go through last week's monetary policy resolution, which is exactly the same as that of August 1st. The resolution says that on the basis of the current and the evolving macroeconomic situation, the Monetary Policy Committee at its meeting today, which is on 8th of October 2021, decided to keep the policy rate under the Liquidity Adjustment Facility, which is the LAF, unchanged at 4%. The reverse repo rate under the LAF remains unchanged at 3.35%, and the marginal standing facility rate, which is the MSF rate and the bank rate, continue to remain unchanged at 4.25%. The MPC also decided to continue with the accommodative stance as long as necessary to revive and sustain growth on a durable basis and continue to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the economy while ensuring that inflation remains within the target range going forward. These decisions, it says, are in consonance with the objective of achieving the medium-term target for consumer price inflation, CPI, at 4%, within a band of plus minus 2% while supporting growth. This has been the MPC resolution for the meeting held on 8th of October also. Like in the previous MPC meet, this time also, its members voted unanimously to keep the policy repo rate unchanged at 4%, and they all voted to continue with the accommodative stance as long as necessary, except one member, which is Professor Jayant Verma, who expressed his reservations about it. The status quo in the interest rates and in the monetary policy stance has been maintained by the RBI now for about 16 months, which is for 8 MPC meetings so far, at a time when the domestic and the world economy have been fluid, they have been uncertain and fluctuating month after month, quarter after quarter, and that fluctuation continues to be so. The shifting sands of the global and the domestic economy are clearly visible in the MPC's own assessment between its August resolution to the one in October now. The changes on the global front in the global economy, as per its October and August assessment, when you compare both of them, they are very clear. And what are they? It had said in August that global growth is in a divergent two-track mode in which countries that are ahead in the vaccination rates and that have provided adequate fiscal stimulus are rebounding strongly. On the other hand, it said growth in the other economies, however, remains subdued because of new waves of infections. That was a two-track analysis that it mentioned in August. This two-track perception of global growth is now gone. The MPC says that the Delta variant of COVID threatens the growth momentum of every nation, irrespective of their rates of vaccination. In August, it had said that the pace of global recovery it said appears, it was not very certain, to be moderating because of the resurgence of infections in various parts of the world. It now says with certainty that the momentum of recovery of the global economy has ebbed due to rapid spread of the Delta variant in countries with even relatively high vaccination rates. The MPC had said in August that the PMI indices had slipped in June and July, whereas it now says that global PMI indices have increased marginally in September, showing perhaps a pickup or at least a shift in direction in global growth. And finally, in its August analysis, it had said that the momentum in global trade volumes was slowing, whereas it now says that global sales volumes are showing resilience despite the persistence of supply logistics bottlenecks in global trade. The changes in the economy on the domestic front, as per the Monetary Policy Committee's assessment between that in October and the one that was in August, are also numerous. While economic activity picked up pace in August because some states had eased their containment measures, it now says in October that the second COVID wave has dragged and it has given a setback to growth momentum. It had said in August that CPI inflation had plateaued at 6.3% in June, with core inflation at 6.1%. It now says that CPI inflation has fallen to 5.3% as against 6.3% in June, and that core inflation now is at 5.8% as against 6.1% in its earlier assessment. While in June, the manufacturing PMI index had contracted to 48.1 according to the MPC, and that it had rebounded to 55.1 in July. It now says that it has gone down to 53.7 in September, of course showing changes in both demand and supply. The services PMI had contracted in August due to the COVID backlash. It is now reported to be in an expansion mode at 55.2 in September 2021, again showing a change in the sector. And of course, economic activity picked up pace in June, July according to it, chiefly because states had eased containment. It is now picking pace according to the MPC due to the ebbing of infections, due to the easing of restrictions, and because of a sharp pickup in the pace of vaccination. As we see, economic uncertainty persists, and change in the momentum as well as in the direction of growth of the economy is the name of the game. Plus, moreover, consumer confidence is yet to be revived. Based on this reality, the outlook of the MPC remains that of cautious optimism, as we say, due to the gaps, due to the deficit, and because of a drag in growth momentum, whose resolution to us lies in the domain of the fiscal policy of the government and not in the monetary policy of the Reserve Bank, which on its own cannot really now bring about much incremental change in economic revival, in economic growth, and also in the growth momentum. The fact is that the repo interest rates have been kept at 4% now for the 8th consecutive meet. The Reserve Bank has been pumping money into the system since then. Reverse repo rates remain at 3.35%, and to discourage banks from parking their surplus funds at the Reserve Bank, it refuses to change this reverse repo rate of 3.35%. And yet, there is a surplus liquidity of 10 lakh crores in the system today, with both the lenders and the borrowers being unwilling to transact loans despite interest rates being low, despite abundant liquidity being there in the system. We seem to have reached a dead end in the monetary policy. All the drawbacks and difficulties pointed out by the MPC in its October outlook can be primarily resolved by the government through its fiscal policy and not single-handedly by the Reserve Bank's monetary policy as is being attempted at the moment. The challenges to growth as per the MPC outlook in October, which puts the ball in the government's court, are: it first says that the threat of rising inflation remains on the horizon. Core inflation persists at an elevated level, and calibrated cuts in indirect taxes on petrol and diesel by both the center and the states will contribute to a more durable reduction in inflation. The MPC thus expects the government to cut taxes on fuel in order to control and mitigate inflation. The second, the outlook for aggregate demand is progressively improving, but the slack is large. Output is still below the pre-COVID level and recovery is at an uneven pace, and it is critically dependent upon policy support, as the MPC notes. It then says that contact incentive services that contribute to about 40% of economic activity in India still lag considerably as compared to the pre-pandemic levels. It then points out that capacity utilization in the manufacturing sector is below its pre-pandemic levels and an early recovery is needed for a sustained rebound in the investment demand, which also is something in the government's code. And it finally points out that against this backdrop, the ongoing domestic recovery needs to be nurtured assiduously through all policy channels, thus indicating that the government needs to do its bit. The reality is that the Reserve Bank cannot order but can only nudge the government to act akin to a polite order to the government, asking it to get its act going. The MPC's experts of the RBI have read the tea leaves of the economy correctly. To us, it is time for the government also to do so. It is time for the government to realize that the ball is in the government's court and all the drags on the economy, all the deficit in growth, all the slowdown of momentum and uncertainty is where it is the government that needs to act, and the Reserve Bank single-handedly is not going to be able to carry the economy on its shoulders. This is Akhilesh Bhargava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.